Well, hello class, and welcome to the start of another week. Week 3, believe it or not. We are, I guess we're a quarter of the way through, so 2 weeks are in the books, and here we go again on week 3. A couple of housekeeping things. I've gotten some questions on quiz answers, and for those of you who are really kind of paying close attention to your score on quizzes, and hey, I thought the answer to this question was this. I know one of you in particular is reading through emails and remembering to get back to you. Here's the deal, okay, with that. What I value so much is an engaged discussion, and so a student saying, hey, I thought that it was this, and giving me a really good rationale, I like that, and so I think that opens up some really good pathways for conversation and discussion. And I'm just going to tell you, if those are well thought out rationales for why you thought answers were one thing, it can actually give explanation. You know, we're not obviously face to face, but in the online environment via email, if that is you and that's something that you're able and you desire to do, I'm more than willing to give credit where credit is due in those discussions, because what that shows is you're really interested in your learning and you're thinking deeply about why things are the way they are. So just know that credit, you may not see it in the quiz itself, but will factor to be into your final score. So for the one student in particular that asked that email question, just know that's coming. Okay. All right, so here we are. We have gone through the first 2 weeks. We looked at kind of an introduction to organizational behavior, talked about the what and the why and all of those things. We started to dig into the habit loop. Okay, so I think that's a very helpful book. I was talking to a student last week, and the conversation was about that book. And so I don't know about you, but I know this one student in particular was saying, man, it's such a great book. It's really caused me to think. You know, it's interesting. I always kind of debate on when do I mention this. I think it's fair to mention it earlier than later, but I was talking to a colleague of mine who teaches in this program as well, and had actually used this curriculum for the same class for the online org behavior course, and we were talking, and he said, you know, I was talking with a student, and they had said that they actually stopped smoking because of that book, The Habit Loop, which or The Power of Habit, which I thought was, oh, that's cool. So yeah, there's some great, I think, powerful things once we realize the habits that we have in our lives. And so, are there triggers? Are there these things that actually initiate our activities and so forth that we can do something about? So when you think about habits, you think about behavior and all that, and obviously you're hopefully starting to see the connections between why we're reading that text. I also was mentioning, or talking with another student, and they were saying that they've never really read a leadership book like this. And so, and here's the thing. I know that we have in our programs, and I would say all programs, I teach the undergraduate level, I teach in 3 different graduate programs here at APU, and I know that we have folks from all different walks of life. We have those in our programs and our courses that would say, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, and those that would say I'm not. And those that would say I'm kind of kicking the tires and figuring out what this whole faith thing looks like. But I enjoy my experience here. My faculty take care of me. There's interest in my overall success and well-being and so forth. So when you think about leadership, the scriptures are rife with leadership. I'm actually giving a talk at a dinner banquet. It's kind of a year-end culminating dinner banquet for the Center for Faith and Work, Los Angeles. It's going to be at I think it's the Ace Hotel in downtown LA this Saturday. And the executive directors of this center asked me to give a talk on leadership, knowing that I had spent the last, out of the last 7 years, I'd spent the last 6 of them full-time in that department, and then 2 previous years in Colorado with APU and a leadership program specifically. And so a lot of my areas of interest and study and research had been in leadership-specific theory and content. And, I keep going back to this idea that, not an idea, I think it's a reality, that according to what we see in Matthew 28:19 through 20, which for those who grew up in the church or around the church, we know that that's the home of what we commonly refer to as the Great Commission. It's the go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. And you think about this phrase at the beginning, go make disciples. Well, the question then is, what's a disciple? Well, a disciple is a follower. Well, the question then again is, a follower of whom? So am I making a follower of me? Or am I creating or being an influence to others so that, like Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ, that others will want to not necessarily follow me for who I am, but they'll want to follow me because I'm following Christ. There's this ongoing discussion. I know you spend some time looking at it in the Cornerstones of Christian Leadership and other courses, but about this idea of followership. And isn't it interesting when you start to think about, hopefully you're seeing these connections made, the foundations of leadership in 501, the cornerstones of leadership in 502, if you're a leadership student. And then there's this org behavior 503 course and the building on these realities and this question of who am I following and who are you following? And I would suggest, I think that the more important question is not what sort of leader or what kind of leader you are or how do you lead, but I would suggest the most important question is, who do you follow? Because who we follow has a significant impact on who it or how it is that we lead and who we are as leaders. Because we attempt to emulate certain people. So if I see a great boss, I want to try and emulate them. If I have a good father or mother, I want to emulate them in my parenting, right? If I just am a good colleague or I have a good colleague, I want to emulate them in my collegiality. And if I serve a big God, I want to be like him. Jesus says or said when he was on earth, he was asked, what is he doing? And he essentially responded and said, I do only that which I see my Father doing. He was following his Father's lead. And Paul then doesn't say, follow me because I'm awesome. In fact, he says, no, I'm the worst of all sinners. Follow me, though, because I follow Christ. So there's this leadership component. So when you get into Boa and Bazell, you're reading about the biblical underpinnings and realities having to do with leadership. So I think it's a really important thing for us to consider, especially when it comes to, like I said, followership, morals, ethics, if there's no such thing as black and white, right or wrong, falsity and truth, and everything, you define your own truth, well, then we're all defining something that's like nailing J-Lo to a wall. There has to be some sort of a line drawn in the sand. There has to be some sort of a commonly understood, this is good leadership. And I think we see some of the best, if not I don't think, and it's not some, it's the best leadership that comes from Jesus. And you think about the ramifications of the work that he did on this earth for 3 short years to where we are, 2,000 years later, the ripple effect has been significant through millennia. So for what it's worth, I think there's some great connections here, and I hope you're enjoying that book. And if nothing else, it's really kind of causing you to think about leadership in new and different, creative, outside-the-box sort of ways. Okay, so this week, again, a good amount to do. You've got this video. There's some brief PowerPoints. You've got your third forum discussion. You have your readings. We're going to talk about perception, attribution, motivation, and engagement, okay? So it's interesting when you think about motivation. What is it that motivates us? When you think about all the potential factors of motivation, money, and I think that more often than not, in fact, I would say most often, people talk about how money is the number one motivator. And yet it's absolutely not. And we'll talk about that in this week's readings. If you remember from our org psych students, and we looked at the 9 connective leadership achieving styles, one of them is intrinsic, right? So you have your intrinsic motivation. So my competition is me, right? So I'm not necessarily just competing with other people, but I'm competing with myself. So if you remember those videos that you watched, you saw the swimmer who, while they may have gotten the gold medal, it was as if they lost the race because they were so fixated on beating their previous personal record, and they didn't do that, yet they still got a gold medal. Okay, so what are the motivations that cause us to want to do certain things? A lot of the discussion will talk about people leave, they're motivated to either do good work, to stay at their work, or they're motivated they're the opposite, demotivated to do good work or stay in their workplace. not necessarily because of money, but because they don't have a good boss, or they don't have a best friend, right? Or they're not given a chance to actually do something that they feel is meaningful and makes a difference. The research indicates these days that especially this current generation would any day of the week would take a job that pays less money, okay, but allows them to do things that they feel is meaningful and makes a difference in the world, versus that of doing some sort of not as impactful work that makes more money. And then we have to get to the question of how do we even define meaning in the first place, right? So, and how do we define success in all of those realities? So there's some really important underlying questions that need to be discussed and answered. And we need to rethink how it is that we think about what it is that motivates us and why our people stay engaged. I don't know if any of you have read Rath and Harder's book. It's called Well-Being, the Five Elements. But if you've read that text, that talks about how, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but at the same time I'll bring it back. It talks about how if an organization is intentionally working towards improving their employees' overall well-being, okay, so their human flourishing, their ability to thrive, right? So Kaiser has, they've turned things around because of their marketing has been around this idea of Thrive, KP Thrive, right? So, and the healthier we are, the more money they make. Okay, so we're still paying our premiums, but if I'm thriving and I'm staying healthy and I'm eating healthy and I'm exercising, I don't go see the doctor. So my premium is being paid, but I'm not actually pulling from the resources available to me at the doctor's office, right? So they really kind of cornered this. But there's this reality that they're helping us to have an increased and enhanced well-being, right? So we're more engaged when we're healthier. We are more successful. And here's the interesting thing, is the cost to the organization is significant. So if you look at that book, Organizational or Well-Being, and then you look at the research that Gallup has conducted, and these are going to be ballpark figures, but there's three different classifications, or I guess stratification, if you will. There's three different kind of categories. There's an individual that is suffering, okay, so that's the lower third. There's one that's struggling, so that's the middle, two-thirds, and then there's the individual that is thriving. And so when you have these three different areas, the individual that is suffering, this is mind-boggling, and at the same time it's not. The individual that is suffering costs an organization $12,000 per year to the bottom line per year in health-related expenses. The individual who is suffering, so they're not doing great, but they're not doing as poor as those who are suffering, costs the organization approximately $7,800 to $8,000 per year. And the individual that is thriving, that is doing well, costs the organization $4,000. So if we want our people, if we're leaders, if we're organizational leaders, it's important that we lead like we want to be led, that we follow the right people, and that we understand what it takes to motivate people, how to help them be engaged. And again, a lot of this, I want you to make these connections, and it's interesting because I don't want to give too much away. If we're in the classroom, I would be asking a lot of these questions, much like we do in the discussion forums, for you to then respond to is, how do you see the connection between habits and perception and attribution and motivation and engagement, okay? So what are the things that we are doing or have done or know to be done that cause some of these realities to take place, okay? So lots going on. I did realize there's a typo in the syllabus. If you look in the reading section, it says Boa et al., pages 28. It should say 280 to 289. There's just no dash there, okay? So if you're confused, that's what it is, those 9 and 10 pages of reading, okay? I'll have your grades posted by the end of this week. So keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. You're doing a great job. Your discussions are fantastic. I'm loving how you're kind of pulling this information out and synthesizing and making your own. So the learning that's going on in this class so far, especially for an online class, and the environment that the community that's being developed is really quite phenomenal. So if you kind of stayed on the edges and not fully engaged, take a deep dive in and get going on this content, because it's really powerful stuff and will make a significant impact both in your own lives and the lives of those with whom you work. Have a great week, and we'll see you online.